back to the Petey Performance Podcast. We were just talking off air there about how it's been 60 episodes since your first appearance on the podcast, and things have changed insurmountably since then, a little bit more professional now. How's your week been going? How's it started? And what have you been up to so far today?
Yeah, week's been awesome. But yeah, like I remember when you came onto the mentorship when we first started talking to each other, you're like, I'm going to do a podcast. I was like, yeah, do a fucking podcast. That'd be so good. I was like, oh, come on, episode 8. There's you and me having a chat. And now you're sending me a document. I've got to sign a contract to come on, give up my image rights and all that. So no, it's just wonderful. Wonderful. So proud that you've had to create this. And the guests that you've had on have been amazing. So more power to you. I mean, as for my week, I just bought some garden furniture, built a deck over the weekend, garden furniture, and yesterday I bought a hot tub. So I'm going in the hot tub tonight.
The cottages really seems to be taken. It might double as an Airbnb soon enough, I reckon, and you can charge a premium rate on that whenever you're not in the country. When you get away from the country, because you said we might slide it in later on the podcast, we might as well slide it in now. At a sports speech certification that you've been working on, You're just telling me that you have plans to go to the States. So talk to me about what the sports speed certification is, and talk to me about where's on your map or your mind map that you want to hit in the States for that.
Yeah, so the sports speed certification has come out of essentially conversations I've had with coaches like yourself over the last 2 to 3 years, even going back to when I was doing intern sessions when I was working back in 2016, 15, and understanding the process of coaching. And I'm a massive fan of primary source education. You know, we talk about, someone like Louis Simmons being a first generation S&C coach, no longer with us. The information, and yes, it's turned 90 last week, right? So I consider myself like a third or fourth generation S&C coach. And the dilution and how far the amount of confusion that's come away from original source is frightening. And so when I find myself in these conversations, you think since the mentorships started, it's 50 coaches all over the world and well over 1,000 hours of conversation now. Like, it's unbelievable. And you learn a lot about what current coaches are going through. And so one of the biggest things is, we sell people on teaching them how to speed, and we give them personal development and tools that actually help them get through life. But the biggest part of it was like, coach, I want to work speed. I don't even know where to start. I don't know how to coach speed. And I'm sick of seeing diagrams drawn on athletes on the internet. And that is the big thing where you spend that time going, do you know what? I'm just going to break it all down. You can take an athlete, or you can take a coach, and the more important, one of my stance on education is I'm giving an opportunity to teach a coach about coaching so they get better at coaching. I don't care about their athletes, because if I do my job, then their athletes will benefit from them doing their job. Whereas a lot of education can be stemmed at, this is what you do for your athlete. And you lose the coach in the process. And that's why the dilutions existed, because we've lost sight of original coaching text. From a simple stance of, I created a four-step qualification system for sprint training. I stole it from Tudor Bomper. Funny that. Learn to sprint, train to sprint to compete, sprint to win. And inside that's one of the key frameworks within the certification. And what I've taken is that actually in Learn to Sprint, these are the things that you need to be hitting. These are the KPIs that you need to be working after, and it's scaled all the way out. And it even takes the heat out of the coach going, do you know what? I don't know what to do next. So I'm just gonna run fast and hope, or I'm not gonna run fast and hope. And I remember when I first put out my speed progressions manual, I literally sat there one day and do you know what? I'm going to write out all the exercises I use and put them in a methodological order. And I think it sold like 1,000 copies in a week or something silly like that. And that was the first insight to there's nothing out there that does this for coaches, and so this is how you organize your mind. This is how we make the process easy for you. And so I guess that's where it kind of really started building, and now it's like 10 modules, and it's, you know, we're completing a full teaching process with it. I always blame my mum, she was a teacher, and if you go right back to look at something like Piaget's cognitive stages of learning, which we've spoke about loads, is that, you know, you have to teach. You have to teach in terms of scale and in terms of where everything matters, you know, 0 to 2 gross motor skill. Well, when you're teaching someone a new thing, they are learning things at gross. Then you have to teach them how to recognize themselves in that environment. So then they have to understand where it fits, then where it applies, and then the nuance around it. So you can't do that through a passive learning means. And that's why we created this 360-degree teaching loop, which is the irony. I'll get on a bit of a tangent, is that also S&C education is delivered by lecturing modalities. Now, if you were to break down the path of teaching in a way that lecturing is talking about information, teaching is the delivery of information, and coaching is the nurturing of that information, then lots of contemporary S&C education has historically been delivered through lecturing. So then it is taught through lecturing. So it misses the gap of teaching. And when you understand that, and that's why I think we get so much juice out of what we do, is because people can go away and actually use it tomorrow, because you give them that opportunity. And so with the 360-degree teaching cycle, it comes from direct education, delegation, and discussion. So that's why you can start the sports speed certification tomorrow and get all the direct access that you want through every module. Then you can get the discussion through the forums and a coach call with myself. Then you can come to a live event, and we'll spend the whole day talking about it. And so you not only have the opportunity to have the abundance of information that you want, but I'll hold your hand and take you all the way through it. And we had a rule inside the certification that if you can't print the slide off and stick it on the wall and someone look at it and not learn something, it doesn't go in. Because otherwise, who's it about? It's about me rather than the person taking the information in.
And don't forget to use discount PDP speed for 15%
yes.
off.
Yes, no, exactly. Yeah, and on that, you know, that's what we literally we're just talking about before. I set up for anyone that wants to use the invest in the certification. There's 15% off right away. You'll have access to the link for anyone as PTP speed. That's what I put the code as. And what that will do is also give you access to the event. So when I come to Ireland, which I will be coming, because Pete's going to help me put on the event in Ireland, I'll be there and you can come to that event. So when you pay for the whole package, you get the whole package. It's, you know, I'm going to be traveling. Luckily, we have a partnership with Hawkins Dynamics, who are based in Boston. And, you know, part of that is going out to America. And Hawkins was so cool because I spoke to him about getting involved in because of the force platforms, obviously, and the data. So we're using data-driven performance. They were like, why do you want us to be involved? And I was like, I want you to be on board in telling people not to use your software. And they were like, absolutely. I'm in, because you don't need a force plate until you need a force plate, and that's the message of it. It's like, how can I get a coach a tape measure and their camera phone and go and get an athlete running 9.5 meters per second? Because you can. You don't need all this software, and even if you wanted to use GPS, it's all in there for you. We even gave you the force velocity profile. It's all done for you. All you have to do is just put your data in, and it gives you everything you need, because it's about the process. So with them, they're obviously, Hawkins have been amazing. There's, you know, they're in 500 companies in America, and we're looking at getting one done at Boston at Mike Boyle's place at some point before Christmas, but we're looking to hit, you know, anyone who is in America. Newport Beach is potentially in January. Then, you know, you've got Boston, we've got Washington. We're looking down in Florida as well. It's going everywhere. Ireland, we'll do Belfast as well, the Republic. And, you know, where else have we got? We've got Germany, we've got Italy, we've got Spain, Australia, Melbourne and Sydney, Thailand. It's over the next year, it's going everywhere. And because that's a huge part of it, is my passion for teaching. And I want to shake everyone's hand who's done it and say, do you understand this? And hopefully I may be tired by the end of it, but my Amex will look really good for flights, and then I'll just go on holiday. But that's the plan. That's the big process with it, you know?
Mate, it's awesome. Props to you, and props to Hawk and Dynamics as well, because that's the sign of a business that are comfortable, know who they are, know what they do, and do not try and sell to people that they would not benefit from using their software. They know what they do. Yeah. They don't need to sell to everybody, and they know that down the line it will pay off for them. But like, exactly what I was going to ask you before you went off on your tangent about teaching, and I'm glad that you did that, because that's what I was going to say. There's not an absence of information out there for coaches around speed coaching, around the what, but the what is almost unimportant if you don't know the how. And you are streamlining that process, giving them all of the information, but showing them this is how you do it. But maybe that happens through lecture forums, on other forums, on online, etc., in-person webinars. But as you said, lecturing is not coaching. So you have to teach in order to coach, and coaching is teaching as well. So it's a two-way process. You've got to be able to interact with athletes. You can't just tell them exactly what to do. You need to see what is being presented to you. You need to interact with that athlete on a 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1 basis, and see how you're going to get them from where they are, their start point, to their end point. And that's going to be different for different athletes, but it sounds like one of the learning objectives of the course of the sports speed certification is for people to be able to identify the nuances, as you said, the differences between athletes, and identify then how these athletes might learn and how best to get them to achieve the ultimate lesson of, say, that stage of the process.
100%. Like, if you go and I, you know, the conversations that you and I have had have been fantastic, because we both coach technical skills as well, and in sport. And so, you know, S&C becomes really easy then, because if you know actually how to teach task-based movement for sport, then the rest of it falls into place quite nicely. And, you know, you go back, you look at like Zasiorski stuff, Issa, and whole coaching is not new. And it is being used over and over again in order to lay foundations for athletes to learn. And, you know, if you look at, we're still the S&C industry is 20 years young, 30 years young, you know, and we've managed to quantify plyometrics to a half decent degree. We've managed to, although speaking to Berkoshansky, it's a very different story. But then when, in terms of speed, that's why I think what do people do? They lift weights and they sprint. And we're only breaking out of that now. We are literally just coming away from it. And I get in my own zone, and that's why I say no one's done this, because I don't care about what anyone else is doing, because what we're trying to do is focus on moving that needle. We talk about who can we get on the bus and get them off at the right time. And when you are looking at your athletes, and through experience, I know from our academy with 9 years old, I've used the learn to train, learn to sprint install systems that I use with a 30-year-old rugby player. I use the same. And And is that wrong? No, it's actually incredibly astute, because the window of opportunity is huge in both. And if you go and you look right back at the curves of physical preparation and motor skill acquisition, that funnel of window of opportunity is vast across so many different athletes. And it's almost a crime when you're talking to, like, I worked with played international rugby, right? International rugby player. Started the season squatting 250 kilos. Finished the season squatting 250 kilos. They didn't change his program. They didn't change anything he was doing. And do you know, the frightening thing was, I was driving 2 hours each way to coach this individual, to give him what he needed. And after his heavy day on a Tuesday, I was driving 2 hours to go and give him that hit that he needed in terms of his speed, because there's that gap of understanding, well, actually, we can let go of those physical qualities because they're not doing anything for us anymore. And understanding that and letting go, because, you know, I'm massively into psychology and human development and personal growth. It's like we essentially call it stepping out of your comfort zone. You have to let go of what you know in order to find what you don't, because anchored to that existing hypothesis is only going to serve you so far. And it's like, that's why the people hate the 1x20 method. Well, we got a 50 kilo kid who can do 22 goblet squats with a 55 kilo dumbbell. Sprint 1.7, like, he's 15, you know, and he's going through maturation. And it's like, well, at the same time, you know, we've got someone like Alex Gray, heel elevated, you know, what was that, 230 kilos, super fast. We didn't even train strength. Does that not show you the opportunity that these means can do? Yes, but where is the path that teaches you and takes you there? And I think that's what we've opened up, and that's what we've really come undone. When you unpack it into exercise classification, you pack it into sequencing program, you're using methodology in the right way, you're blending it through in a system that then you go, right, this guy has been playing for 7 years, he's had an ACL, he's strong as an ox, but coach thinks he's slow. Right, I know exactly where to put him. I know exactly what to do with that person.
How much of that type of thinking now, slightly off topic, but at the higher end of the spectrum, as you just touched on with international rugby, there comes from a fear in regards to the risk to reward ratio from the coaches, that they think, oh, well, he's good enough, so we'll just leave him alone. And hopefully he gets better by himself, or he just stays where he's at and keeps peaking, and we just don't want to upset the apple cart. We don't want to annoy him in any way. We just want him to stay happy because he's so important to us. That's somewhat of a fixed mindset in a way as well. It's not very growth orientated, is it? It's kind of like, he's that good, as you just said. He's slow, but he's good at maybe scoring points or whatever. So let's just focus on having him good to score points. Whereas if we improved his weakness, would it not be more beneficial to him as well? Because we're both have the opportunity to raise the ceiling and the floor.
Yeah, well, it's such a good point that you make, because it's almost like, I don't even know how to explain it properly, because essentially what they're saying is that what makes him good, you know, for example, he squat 250 kilos, so, but he's slow. And that same person in that same breath would tell you that rate of force development is really important.
But we don't train it.
No. And what's the difference between, you know, hamstrings, injuries? It's rate of force development. Everything's rate of force development. How fast the force is accruing. So if you are only training in those conditions, it's almost like, well, squats are really useful until you become a powerlifter. And at the same time, in the certification, and I've created archetypes. So I've created like five archetypes of team sport athlete. I think you've got the bodybuilder, the powerlifter, the crossfitter, the sprinter, and the games player. And and I'm not saying you only need to sprint, because then what do you become? You just become a sprinter. So like, there's a reason why in the NFL, sprint coaches are hired to develop the combine 40-yard, because it's a sprint discipline.
Just to do that as well. Just to do that. Making millions.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of the time, like, you see guys get drafted that aren't very good. And a lot of the time, they just lie about the times anyway. So it's everywhere, right? So so then you got to think about this. Specialization is really important in the right areas that you need it, and in your coaching practice. And I urge anyone just to look at this and take a step back. It's like, how far am I pushing my athlete down a path for then that becomes their speciality? And you and I both look at this as, I got my level 2 rugby coaching badge. I'm going to do my American football coaching badges, right? And how far does it come until it takes that away? And that's a huge part of it, because you look at it through a different lens. And in the industry, it's like, well, I'm just an S&C coach, the technical coach, doing my fucking head in. He's dumb. No, he's not. You're just not that smart either. Look at it in the other way. Someone like Ronan O'Gara, for example, probably don't give a Scooby-Doo about S&C. He's a games player. But what he understands from some of his recent things, he understands the importance of specificity of development. The thing that he said about Leinster, the point scoring, and I saw subject here on the call, but I thought it was genius that he understood the specificity of task.
He's worrying about things that other head coaches probably wouldn't worry about. Well, not even worrying about. He's taking them into account. He's taking into account what the analysts are telling him, which is all that you need from a head coach, really.
Yeah. And then you got the S&C coach crying in the corner going, I want him to squat.
Well, funnily enough, you mentioned that, because I was actually in Marseille and I was there early. And on the Thursday night, who did I bump into on the piss and had a beer with was the head of S&C for La Rochelle.
Oh, amazing.
And I said, it was late. I'd say it was about 9:30, 10 o'clock when I met him.
Yeah.
And I said, should you not be in the hotel doing something? And he said, well, at this stage, I've done everything that I can. They're playing on Saturday. Like, they're not going to get any stronger. So himself and some of the performance staff went out for a beer. And that just shows that he's not worried about his position in the coaching setup, because the coaching setup is obviously an open and honest environment where everybody knows their place, which is what we're just talking about. Everybody contributes, but at the same time, when to relinquish your power and pass over to maybe the technical coach. Or at that stage, as he brought up to me as well, was it's probably more so the job of the sports psychologist and then ownership of the players themselves at this stage. The analysts, etc., they can't do too much on a Thursday night, 2 days before a Champions Cup final, So it's a powerful thing, and it takes balls as well to be able to say and be confident enough to say, I've done a good enough job. Like, I'm going to go have a beer.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Yeah. In my head as well, thinking, whenever you're going to run a team or you want to go down that rabbit hole, I'm looking at it, thinking from my own playing, like legs in and feeling what it's like in May, for example, or April or March. Shit the bed. I'm not doing much S&C then.
Absolutely.
Honestly, I'm no mean of a elite athlete. It's not playing anywhere that's important, to be honest. But the the situation's the same, you know, and it's like when you're working with your group of athletes and you're working with that's a huge, you know, your man from La Rochelle is fantastic, because, you know, I'm thinking in my head right now, off the top of my head, I'm looking, well, let's get the boys to Christmas. And if I've got a rugby team, right, let's get the boys to Christmas, see where they're at. And then we're changing everything that we're doing after Christmas with regards to S&C, because why? They're 20 games in.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest is, well, you're hoping that everything you've done on the front end is going to hold you to it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I'm looking, this is where like my thoughts, and from recent conversations with a lot of guys that work in professional soccer, is like, I'm looking at my sessions in more like hybridized way, as opposed to, you know, you're getting out on the field and right, we're going to do some of our higher yielding qualities, so some of our speed work, then, you know, we'll do some ballistic stuff, and that will be a repeating pattern. We'll go into our intensive team play, and then we'll sack it on the head. Then, you know, we can revisit our general qualities as and when we need to in the gym, you know, muscle mass maintenance, neck, shoulder, groin, all those things. But why am I not chunking in a much more robust fashion? And do you know where that's come from? That's come from coaching in the part-time world as well, because that's all you can do. That's all you have to do. And you do your 2 hours, for example, you do 90 minutes, and then they're done, and then they have to go away and top up their own weights. So why are we not thinking that way in our development? And when we understand where the athlete is on that path, then it's really easy to say, do you know what, go on, you're topped up, you're training to win now, and that's it. So I don't care what you do.
It comes back to like a vertical integration type model to your periodization.
Yeah.
And the funny thing with that is there are parallels between that kind of model to your S&C and then the tactical periodization of tactics and gameplay. And you have to touch various qualities, as we just said, throughout the season and throughout the week. But that's all you have to do really, is touch them and then have a specific focus. Be that, as you just said there, your specific focus might be acceleration for one athlete, one archetype. It might be max speed for another archetype. And something that Ron O'Gara actually does as well a lot is he classifies his athletes and his players into archetypes too. And using those kind of frameworks in your mind, it makes your job as a coach an awful lot easier. And you've talked about systems and frameworks a lot already, and it's something that you and me both see great value in. But I still see that it has to be individualized, but individualized to an extent. I think younger coaches, and me in my youth as well, thought that everything individualized had to be written from scratch. But individualization, that's not what it's about. We spoke about it on last week's podcast with Ian Jones as well. There are going to be athletes that fall into similar categories. And that seems to be something with the sports speed certification, is you're trying to deliver a little bit of information into how to categorize your athletes for coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a it's such a powerful tool. I'm not in the business of making my life difficult. And I'm definitely not in the business of making my athletes' life difficult either. And we go back to the difference between lecturing, teaching, and coaching. It's like you can teach the same thing, but you coach it differently. That's where the progress is. It's in the coaching. And it's like you can do all different types of wall drills, but if you don't coach them, then there's no point doing them.
There's no point doing them,
And it's like, you know, as soon as you unpack for something like wall drills and you actually put it in means of exercise classification, then they become really useful. But if you're just doing a wall drill, then it's useless.
I had this conversation last week, actually.
Yeah. And so it's like, then once you have these pieces of the puzzle, you can just move people through, and you can let go of the power of it, because you don't have to hold it.
the power of coaching is in the process, and the process in terms of that process needs to have fantastic origins that are grounded in primary resource. You know, I had a chat with Yusuf Johnson, is the owner of Ultimate Athlete Concept. You know, he's got Bondarchuk's phone number, right? And I spoke to him, and he was like, "Mate, nothing has changed in the last 30 years. Nothing else. We just made it worse." And so when you go back, and I encourage people to, you know, go and read those primary texts, because it's all in there, and your processes are all in there. What allows you to develop and move your athletes in the right direction, it's your responsibility to know that as a coach. And, you know, not having to worry about, like, I don't write training programs from scratch anymore, because I don't have to. And the reason why the certification is so powerful is because it's had data through it. Like, you've got like silos, and I like to see things in extremes, because then it allows me to bridge them together. So let's look at this. You've got the essence. You go to archetypes, right? So you've got the gym-based S&C guy. You've got the speed guy, the speed-based S&C guy that's like running with water balloons and all sorts. And then you've got the sports scientist. If the data doesn't match up, then the world's going to end, right? But when you're looking at that, all of them will say, my thing works because I've seen it work. So in terms of when you're creating a system, systems create behaviors. Then the reason why the sport speed stuff is so powerful is that it's holistic in nature. So it combines all of those, and it's had data through it. It has been stress tested, and that all the levels have been stress tested through qualification, not through level of performer.
Yes.
So you're taking it back to primary, because what we know is that speed is a general quality for team sports. It's below the line of specificity. Speed, ballistics and power, strength, whatever. Above the line, game preparation, game performance. So it still sits below the line. So it doesn't matter what that person can do with the ball. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what gives you ease.
And then in terms of the qualification through the progressions or the exercises, etc., have you quantified that? Have you qualified it? How have you developed that? Or is it very much up to developing that coaching eye in the coach that goes through the certification, so that they can make the decision themselves?
Yeah, so what we've done in certain areas of it, and obviously, like everything, this is version 1, but what we've done with it is create, so first of all, the cheat sheet. So if an athlete can't project off step 1, well, this is what they need to do to clean all this up. This is what they need to do in the gym. Okay, so we stack our metrics like we stack our drills, because that's why data is important, because it needs to lead to something. And then and so with that, then you give the athlete the opportunity, and we rank things, right? So if someone, through those 4 criteria, so for example, right, if someone can squat over their body weight, right, they've crossed over the piece of learning to train. Okay, they are training to train. So if they are training to train, then what they need to be able to do is exhibit the physical capacities and qualities in the specialized developmental exercises of learning to sprint in order for them to train to sprint. Because what we're trying to do is see how far the general quality of strength can take that athlete. So it's a simple 4x4. So, and for every level, we'll have a 4x4. So example, if you're level 1, so if you're learning to sprint and you are learning to train, then everything is basically sitting at how are we developing motor skill for both of those, and we're going to get faster. If you are training to sprint, then we are looking at the, for example, like the leading indicator metric of acceleration after broad jump will be multiple broad jump, which will be training to sprint metric, which is going to demonstrate force conversion horizontal vectors. Then it's the question of the general strength quality associated to that, which probably should be peak trap bar strength, concentric only. Where is that relative to body weight, relative to drop off and decrement in multiple broad jump? When we work out the drop off in the decrement of multiple broad jump, then we know the next piece of the puzzle is going to be reactive ballistic power, which, how do we train that? We do that in faster pulley walks, because we're minimizing the contact time on the ground, but still it's becoming a high strength speed activity, which then we bleed them on. And do you know what you do? You test that against their 10. And I guarantee you it'll work, because it's physics.
And within that framework, then, is there also, and have you focused on the specific cues that should be used with athletes to developing all of those necessary qualities? Because when you were just talking there, I was just thinking myself that I think a lot of the problem, and to bring it back to the wall drills as well, is strength and conditioning coaches sometimes get too tied up in the physical or the physical part of an exercise, the physical use of it, how it works on a physical quality, but they neglect the learning and the teaching component of doing that exercise. So as you just said, in your specific developmental type exercises or preparatory exercises, which would be your wall drills, I was having a conversation with a coach a couple of weeks ago who was saying wall drills are completely useless. And I was like, well, they're probably fairly useless in developing physical qualities. But what they allow us to do is they allow us to teach the athlete how to execute a specific action or a specific task, if that makes sense. And then by teaching them how to do that, we can then progress them on in your framework to their next stage of the what would you call it, the process, which would be being able to produce force horizontally, which you just touched on, would be your broad jump, etc. And in that way, we streamline the process so that we get the best out of the athlete, and we make it easy for the coach in this framework, because the coach doesn't have to actually think about how am I going to progress this exercise. It's already down on paper and there for them.
Yeah, and you just have to coach it, and that's where we just remove all the confusion, and that's what I love about it, is that let's let coaches coach. And when you break it right down as well, like, you know, people use the term project, but they don't understand the physics of projection. You have to, it's the displacement. It's like, let's project. What the fuck are you talking about? And then it's like, and it grinds my gears as someone, the short-sightedness of saying, you know, wall drills are rubbish. Can we get a video of that guy projecting and let's see what happens? Well, let's put him on some wall drills and we'll fix that. Because it then becomes that issue of, well, what do people need? How, you know, I love carpentry. I built my own gym. I don't use a hammer for everything. It's about finding the right time. It's about finding the right piece, but also why, you know, we know that the argument of, okay, so I can squat 200 kilos, but I can't get off the line. Well, because your orientation of force is special strength training. It's your orientation of force is wrong. Well, yeah, but I don't have a sled. Well, there are so many other ways in which you can develop that. And we even use simple things, right? Take this, all you listeners, get a pen and paper out, right? If you don't have any equipment and you want to develop acceleration and you don't have a hill, okay, this is a really simple progression that you can use. Okay, you're going to work a stack. You'll have upright acceleration, you'll have crouched acceleration, you'll have kneeling acceleration, and then you'll have accelerations from lying on your chest. The lower you go, the more strength dominant it becomes. The higher you are, the more velocity dominant it comes. If you undulate and variant of those, then you will get faster off the mark. Hands down. And if you only focus out from steps 1 to 3, because that's the one thing that we've done as well, is we've broken for team sports, we've broken it out from acceleration in our phases. We've actually condensed the track and field model into the team sport model, because you've got steps from 1 to 3, and 4 to 7. That's acceleration, 3 steps. Then 4 to 7 is your transition, and 7 to 15 is max velocity. That's all you have in the perfect world. And so, we're looking at different KPIs and different qualification that you need to access those areas. And if you're like, if we go right back to like the acceleration stuff, if you cannot project, and projection is just not getting off the mark, a horizontal displacement of max. Projection goes back to physics of projectiles. That's what I did. I'd done an hour fundamental physics for sprinting presentation in it, and broke it all right back down. It's the physics of projectile, and projectiles is acted upon with 0 net forces apart from gravity. So projection is rubbish. It doesn't make sense, because you can't coach what's in the air, because there is no force acting upon it apart from gravity. Okay, you have to pick up the phone and dial up the Earth's core to have a discussion with that. And I'm being very obtuse, because I just want to clear this up, because it's a big minefield for coaches. It's like, what do we do? What do we do? You don't do anything. What you do is you focus on the relationship, but it's a parabolic relationship. So every time the foot goes down, the foot hits the ground, the hip has to go further and higher. And that's it. And that's all you need to see. In steps 1 to 3, it's not going as high as it is in 4 to 7. But if you can't get up and out in 4 to 7, then you are never getting out. Because you need to change the orientation of horizontal displacement to vertical displacement. You just need to tease it up. And when you're coaching in the language of coaching, it's really important to understand physics. That's why you should never use the cue attack back, because it applies that the object is at rest. Because then if you attack back, then you are going to ground contact time behind, too far behind the point of contact at which you need to propel the athlete forward, because it's actually propulsion, not projection, which is the key, because we're creating momentum. So if you attack too far behind, your ratio of where your ground contact is, irrespective of what you can do on the ground, is going to be wrong.
And you fall over.
Then what you will, yes, you will create over rotation. You'll create an over rotation, and then you're game over.
Then you're slowing down.
Yeah. So do I say hit the ground? Because you're only going to hit the ground where you're going to hit the ground. And what's the best thing about having someone with long femurs and a short body? That's great. That you can have an archetypal cue, because most of those are sprinting in the Olympics. Whereas everyone else just needs to, it's the relationship of where the hips are and where the foot is when they hit the ground. So just hit the ground, and then we can adjust. And 9 times out of 10, it's just get your bum further forward. Can you do that for me, please? And encourage them to do that, and encourage them in that way to do that.
And that is an issue as well, is people hear other people's cues, and they don't necessarily understand the cue, and then they'll just roll the cue out, and they won't be able to explain it. As you just said, their projection. If you say project to an athlete and they've never heard it before, they're not going to have a bleeding clue what you're talking about. Like they won't have a notion. But that's why you need to have a background in at least understanding basic physics if you are going to be able to coach these things effectively. But maybe not need, but it's absolutely useful. It's absolutely incredibly useful. Yeah.
And it allows you to program. Yeah.
But it also allows you to explain, which is half of coaching is explanations, because if you're doing it right and you have a decent rapport and you're creating an open environment, your athletes are going to ask you questions. You're going to have to answer them. Yeah. And you're going to have to work to a common solution with them. Which it sounds like from everything you've been talking about so far about the certification, you have put an awful lot of time into it yourself, but is an aspect that you're looking forward to of the certification in getting out there and deliberating and talking and conversing with other coaches at these in-person seminars.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. That's when the juice is there, because it's, we did the event in London, and that's the power of legacy. Even though it's online, like you've been there, and like a group of coaches just talking about stuff. And in terms of, just use the example of speed, like talking about the issues that they face with their coaching speed. But then you get to put them all in the room, and then I get to put them under pressure. Then I get to go, you know what, go and fire this off. You've got 10 minutes. You've got 10 minutes to go and sort this out. And you know what you're going to do? You're going to coach this person. And then there's that coach. And then you're going to qualify against that coach. You're going to qualify him. You're going to get a plan of attack. You're going to make him better. And you're going to clean him up. And you've got 10 minutes to sort it out. And then you've got 20 minutes to put it together. And then you're going to go and show everyone. Because that's how easy it is. And then when you get people in that room, the energy is electric. Because what do they get out of that? They don't just get out of that a sense of, oh, I know about speed. What do they get? They get a new sense of themselves. They do get a new sense of themselves, and it's really, really powerful. And that's the experience that you're creating. And when you're faced with that responsibility, and I take this stuff so seriously, because that's why I'm traveling around the world with it. That's why, what do you want your legacy to be? It's the power of what you can create. And it's not what you leave behind, it's what you build. And one of the biggest challenges that I faced with this certification is, do you know what? I've not worked with an international team. I've not worked with someone who's been to the Olympics. Do you know what I've done? I've worked with all the coaches that need this problem solved. And that's the qualification in it. I remember the first time I was like, I want to be an England coach. I want to do S&C for England. Then I helped out at Six Nations, and I was so bored. I was like, I'm not doing anything here. This is babysitting. And so, disrespect to anyone who does it. We need it. Everyone loves sport. Hopefully England will win a World Cup sometime soon.
Hopefully
again.
Not.
Yeah. But then, what are you doing? You create effective change. You're moving people. You're changing their expectations of themselves. And when you can do that to someone, it's so powerful. And when in creating, it took me 4.5 months to write the certification. And it's possibly one of the hardest things that I've ever done. I have my own mentor. I have my own coaches that I work with. And one day I sat on the call, and he was like, "You're right." I was like, "No, mate." He asked me one question, and I can't remember what it was. It was like, it wasn't going as well. It's like, I'm going to be embarrassed. And he was like, "Embarrassed of who?" And I was like, "Right." I was like, this is killing me. Because the amount, it's not about what you're producing, it's what you want it to produce, and the level of impact. And when you're going, right, I've got a list of exercises, and that's maybe £1,000. That's great. I'm trying to change industry standard. And the weight of that is something that I take very, very seriously.
It's been an incredible journey so far for the mentorship and the legacy group. And I'm going to ask a big one now, completely off topic, but how has running the mentorship and the legacy group changed you over the last 18 months or so?
Massively. My journey has been not the typical one, and there's been lots of challenges along the way. And it has, it became, the first time I did it, it really just jumped on me in a way that was like, you're doing more than teaching people sets and reps. Yeah, you're being the person that you needed, and the person that, for me, that I didn't have. And it's bigger than coaching. And that's why it's, as soon as I started realizing that, Sledging is like, mate, you fucking changed my life. and he's making 6 figures a year, coaching who and whatever he wants. It's like, I was a part of that, and he's happy, and it's like, fuck, this is unbelievable. And it's changed me. And what it's done is it's especially recently, it's managed to rid me of some of my old stories. And we're a product of a story that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And I had lots of motivation. My backstory, some of the tragedy I've had in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last year or so, helping coaches and growing this and going through this, I have realized I've got to the point where that motivation is not enough anymore. And that's where you have to let go. And then that's when you get to move forward. And that's when you get to really change. And that's how it's changed me. I changed the way I look at everything. And working with the 15, 20 coaches that we have now in Legacy that are not only just getting jobs, they have better well-being, they have a better sense of themselves, they're doing things for all the right reasons, is something that I know that I hate being on the computer, but I'll go and I'll create 10 lectures tomorrow because one of those conversations allows someone else to move forward in an area that they have to. And when you get people like Jason Fox coming in and telling us about their story, you get Buddy Morris, you get all these people, Dan Pfaff, and they come onto these conversations and they are so authentic. And what are they saying? They're saying all the things that we are trying to achieve. I can't thank it enough.
And I can't thank you enough, Sam, for that as well. Exhibit 1 right here. I'm just going to ask you one quick fire question because you've actually done the quick fire questions before.
Yeah.
Proudest achievement in the last year?
Oh, Jesus. I guess I never really thought about it, but to be self-employed and I bought my own house, that's pretty cool. I'm quite proud of that. And I'll dovetail on that. And the reason why I'm proud of that is that it's demonstrating what is possible for coaches that are not in that position. All goes back to legacy. And
we'll continue striving to do better and put the industry in a better place. Thanks a million for your time, Sam. Round 2, just as enjoyable as round 1. I'm sure I'll be chatting to you in the near future anyway. And you can get Sam over at Coach Sportland, as you know. And if you're interested in the sports speed certification, remember, use the code PDP Speed for 15% off. You'll get everything that's available, all of the information there. You will get access to a one-time call with Sam, and you'll get a ticket to the in-person seminar of the speed certification, wherever that may be, all over the world. I wish you all the best over the next 12 months of travel, which sounds awesome. I might join you myself, Sam. Appreciate your time and have a good week, mate.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. All the best.